"Leave my house," my mother-in-law screamed, her face contorted with rage as she threw my packed suitcases onto the porch. My husband stood right behind her, arms crossed, staring at me with a cold, triumphant smirk. He was the golden boy, the high-flying CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech firm, and everyone in our town treated him like a saint. They thought I was just a lucky, penniless girl who had hit the jackpot by marrying him. But as the neighbors gathered on their lawns to watch my public humiliation, I didn't cry. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a sleek black flash drive, plugging it directly into the outdoor projector they had set up for his upcoming anniversary party. Seconds later, the giant screen lit up, exposing the terrifying truth about her CEO's son and turning their victory into an absolute nightmare. My name is Aria. I'm 29 years old, and until very recently, I believed I was living a modern-day fairy tale. As a freelance graphic designer, I've always been someone who pays attention to the small details, the subtle strokes that create a bigger picture. But for 4 years, I completely missed the ugly truth hiding behind the glossy veneer of my own marriage. My husband, Julian, was the golden boy of the local tech and logistics scene. At just 32, he was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar firm, celebrated by the media as a self-made visionary. To the world, he was charismatic, brilliant, and fiercely protective of his family. To me, he was the man I loved, or at least the man I thought he was. Then there was Madeline, my mother-in-law. Madeline didn't just walk into a room. She commanded it with a cold, aristocratic elegance of someone who believed wealth was synonymous with worth. From the moment Julian brought me home to their sprawling estate, Madeline made it her personal mission to remind me that I was a penniless outsider. I was just a girl from a working-class background who had somehow tricked her brilliant son into a wedding ring. Julian always told me to ignore her. "She's just protective, Aria," he would whisper, kissing my forehead. "You're my wife. That's all that matters." I wanted so badly to believe him. I swallowed my pride, smiled through Madeline's passive-aggressive barbs at family dinners, and worked tirelessly to manage their massive household while maintaining my own design clients. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I was supportive enough, I would finally earn a seat at their table. I had no idea I was just a pawn in a very dangerous game. The subtle shifts started small, the kind of micro-changes you easily brush off when you trust someone completely. Julian began taking his business calls in the locked home office, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper whenever I passed the door. His laptops, which used to sit open on the kitchen island, were suddenly protected by complex biometric locks, and he never left his phone face up on the counter anymore. When I asked him if everything was okay at the firm, he snapped, telling me I wouldn't understand the pressures of high-level corporate finance. Meanwhile, Madeline's psychological warfare escalated. During our weekly Sunday lunches, she started dropping pointed, cruel hints that my time in the family was limited. "A true CEO needs a partner who elevates his social standing, Aria," she sneered over her crystal wine glass, right in front of Julian. "A man of his caliber outgrows things. And people." Julian didn't defend me. He just stared at his plate, a strange, calculated coldness in his eyes that sent a shiver straight down my spine. The turning point came on a Tuesday night. Julian was supposedly at a late-night board dinner, and the house was dead silent. I was working late on a graphic design project when our shared home network experienced a sudden, severe lag. As I logged into the router's admin panel to reset the bandwidth, I noticed a massive, continuous data upload mirroring from Julian's personal laptop to an unrecognized, encrypted cloud network. Out of pure curiosity, I clicked on the source link. A prompt flashed on my screen, requesting a secondary administrative password. My heart did a slow, heavy thud. It wasn't a standard corporate firewall. It was a hidden vault, masked behind a dummy folder labeled Tax Receipts 2022. Before I tell you what I found inside that hidden vault, I want to pause and thank everyone who has followed my journey so far. Please take a moment to comment the city or country you're watching from. I love seeing how far across the world my story has reached. That night, alone in the dark house, I stared at the blinking password prompt. Julian had left for a 4-day urgent investor summit in Chicago, leaving me with the perfect window of time. As a designer, I had helped Julian set up some of his early branding accounts years ago. I remembered he used a specific, complex alphanumeric sequence based on his childhood address for his oldest secure files. With trembling fingers, I typed it into the field. The screen flashed green. Access granted. I expected to find evidence of a betrayal that every wife fears, another woman, secret hotel receipts, or hidden text messages. But as I opened the subfolders, the reality was infinitely more terrifying. There were no love letters. Instead, the drive was filled with bank statements from offshore accounts, internal audit reports showing catastrophic losses, and a folder labeled Liability Shield. I clicked it, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside were scanned copies of my own driver's license, my signature meticulously forged onto corporate loan documents totaling $3.5 million. Julian's logistics empire wasn't booming. It was a failing house of cards. He had been embezzling money from his primary investors to fund his and Madeline's lavish lifestyle, and he had set up the legal paperwork so that when the company inevitably collapsed, the entire financial and criminal liability would fall squarely on me. I wasn't just an outsider to them. I was their designated scapegoat. I sat in the glow of the monitor, realizing the man I loved was planning to send me to prison to save himself. I didn't even have time to copy all the files before the trap snapped shut around me. The very next evening, I walked through our front door after a brief design meeting, only to find the entire downstairs in absolute chaos. It was the night before Julian's highly publicized 10-year company anniversary gala, and the catering staff was already buzzing around the backyard setting up tents. But inside the foyer, a completely different scene was unfolding. My suitcases were stacked haphazardly near the door, and Madeline stood in the center of the room, her eyes wild with a manic, triumphant energy. Julian stood right behind her, his arms tightly crossed over his chest, wearing a cold, unaffected smirk. He had checked the digital cloud logs and realized I had successfully breached his hidden vault. To prevent me from going to the police or alerting his board of directors, they had decided to destroy my credibility first, framing me as an unstable, gold-digging wife. "Leave my house," Madeline suddenly screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings as she grabbed my packed bags and threw them violently onto the front porch. The commotion immediately drew the attention of the neighbors and several early arriving board members who were parking outside. Madeline marched out after the bags, shouting for everyone to hear that I had been caught trying to steal corporate funds from her brilliant, self-made son. Julian followed, looking the part of the deeply wounded, dignified CEO. They expected me to break down, to cry, and to run away in utter humiliation before I could speak a single word of the truth. But as the crowd gathered on the manicured lawns to watch my public disgrace, I felt a strange, icy calm wash over me. They expected me to flee into the night, broken and silenced, but they forgot one critical detail. I was the one who had spent the last 3 days coordinating the technical setup for Julian's grand anniversary gala. I knew exactly how the outdoor AV system worked, and more importantly, I knew the master override code for the main feed. As Madeline continued her dramatic performance, shouting to the gathering crowd about my alleged greed, I calmly walked over to my car. I didn't touch my suitcases. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out a sleek black flash drive containing the mirrored data from Julian's hidden vault, and marched directly toward the tech pavilion hidden behind the catering tents. Julian noticed my direction too late. His smirk instantly vanished as he realized what I was doing. He lunged forward to stop me, shouting for security, but my fingers were already flying across the master control laptop. With a final, definitive tap of the enter key, I plugged in the drive and overrode the pre-scheduled company tribute video. Seconds later, the massive, state-of-the-art outdoor projector lit up, casting a 40-foot image directly onto the white brick facade of the mansion for the entire neighborhood, the arriving board members, and the local press to see. It wasn't a slideshow of Julian's corporate milestones. It was a crystal-clear display of the offshore bank transfers, the fraudulent audit sheets, and a glaring, high-resolution side-by-side comparison of my real signature next to his sloppy, forged copies on the $3.5 million liability loans. The entire yard fell into a breathless, Dead silence as the truth about her golden CEO son was violently dragged into the light. The shift in the yard was instantaneous and brutal. The whispers died out, replaced by a heavy, suffocating shock as the board members stepped closer to the giant screen, their eyes scanning the undeniable financial data. Madeline's triumphant, arrogant expression withered in seconds, her face turning a ghastly, translucent pale. She looked at the screen, then at her son, her lips trembling but unable to form a single defensive word. Julian completely panicked. The poised, untouchable CEO facade shattered into a million pieces right before my eyes. He began screaming at the catering staff to pull the cables, running toward the projector himself in a desperate, frantic attempt to block the light with his own body. But it was far too late. The local journalists who had arrived early to cover the gala were already raising their cameras, their rapid clicks and bright flashes capturing his undoing in real time. Suddenly, the synchronized ringing of cellular phones began to echo across the lawn. The board members were already calling their legal teams, and Julian's personal phone was lighting up with frantic, high-priority alerts from his chief investors. The house of cards had officially collapsed. I picked up my car keys from the tech table and walked right past the frozen crowd. Madeline didn't look at me. She was staring blankly at the ground, her social standing ruined forever. Julian looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic rage, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of a single word. I simply stepped into my car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving them completely submerged in the catastrophic mess of their own making. 3 months later, the dust has finally settled, and my life looks completely different. Julian's empire dissolved almost overnight. The evidence displayed on the projector that evening sparked an immediate federal investigation into his logistics firm. He was arrested just 2 days later on multiple counts of corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny. Because my attorney used the original, untampered digital logs to prove the signatures on those massive liability loans were absolute forgeries, all charges against me were dropped before they even made it to a courtroom. Madeline didn't escape the fallout either. To cover Julian's mounting legal fees and pay back a fraction of the furious investors, they were forced to liquidate all their assets. The sprawling estate was foreclosed on, and Madeline now lives in a tiny, rented apartment on the edge of town, completely shunned by the elite social circles she used to rule with such cruelty. As for me, I packed my bags and moved to a vibrant city by the coast. My independent graphic design business is thriving, and for the first time in years, I wake up feeling safe, free, and completely accountable to myself. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you discovered your spouse was planning to frame you for a multi-million-dollar crime? Would you have exposed them publicly like I did, or handled it quietly? Let me know in the comments below. I've also left 2 other incredible stories on the screen right now that I know you'll love. Thank you for watching.